Inspired in large part by our conversation with my friend and colleague Rachel Maddow about how we cover this moment, this now convicted ex-president, current president, this extraordinary moment. We have a story for you. It starts like this: shot and chaser. At a time when the ex-president, now convicted felons, rantings and ravings about things like sharks and electric boats and whether he'd go with electrocution or getting eaten by the shark, have everybody, regardless of political persuasion, talking about his state of mind. At that moment, a merchant of right-wing talking points and sometimes even disinformation is going into overdrive with calculated and relentless regional attacks on President Joe Biden. Statements by Donald Trump, on the other hand, so unhinged. Fox News didn't carry them or broadcast them, didn't go back and air them after the fact either. In the words of Stephen King, that speech was, quote, like listening to your senile uncle at the dinner table after he has that third drink. So that performance and others like it are reviving real questions about Trump's stability, his mental acuity, questions Trump loves to talk about. He's in on this conversation and has been for years. Watch.
The next day they'll say he's crazy. The next day they'll say, oh, he's incompetent. The next day they'll say, this is one of the dumbest human beings ever. And that wasn't working, but I didn't like that one as much. I mean, that was bad. So I asked Doc Ronnie. I said, what do you think about a cognitive test, Ronnie? Then he said, sir, there is a test. It's called the X test. Then you get to the end questions, and very few people could answer those questions. A chair, a hat, a badge, a necklace. Like a giraffe, a tiger, or this, or that, a whale. Which one is the whale? Person, woman, man, camera, TV. They say, that's amazing. How did you do that? I aced it twice. I aced it, and I aced it. I aced both of them. Aced it. I aced it. Every question right.
Most of us are wondering who said that's amazing, right? But there's more. Now for the chaser. Over the last week in this country, local news stations owned by the Sinclair Broadcast Group, which actually controls nearly 200 local TV outlets all across the country, millions of viewers, probably lots of all of our neighbors. So those stations have been airing a story, a TV package, with nearly the exact same script about reporting from the Wall Street Journal that was highly criticized for being highly critical about President Joe Biden's mental acuity.
The Wall Street Journal calling into question.
The Wall Street Journal has published a story. The Wall Street Journal is out with new reporting.
Calling into question the mental fitness of President Joe Biden.
Calling into question the mental fitness of President Biden.
President Joe Biden's mental fitness being questioned once again.
As national correspondent Matt Galka tells us, the issue could be an election decider.
As national correspondent Matt Galka tells us, the issue could be an election decider.
As national correspondent Matt Galka tells us, the issue could be an election decider.
But could it be an election decider? Here's Matt Galka with a story for us.
So the only difference in the scripts, right, was whether there was a question mark after could it be an election decider question. It could be an election decider, right? Identical scripts pushed out to local news stations. Now, those broadcasts first caught the attention of the newsletter's Popular Information and Public Notice. The segments are talking about what they have sort of regurgitated is a piece of reporting in the Wall Street Journal. And in that story, there's reporting that goes like this. Basically, behind closed doors, President Joe Biden was showing signs of slipping. Now, the only person quoted on the record in that story is former Speaker Kevin McCarthy, who, after his dealings with Joe Biden, actually described President Joe Biden as, quote, sharp and capable. The piece faced blowback from Democrats, people like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, who had offered their accounts of President Joe Biden behind the scenes to the Wall Street Journal. But their quotes and their characterizations of the president did not make it into the final edited version of the story. The New Republic reports this, quote, it is not the first time Sinclair, owned by right-wing businessman David Smith, has appeared to be running a conservative propaganda campaign. Infamously, in 2018, dozens of the company's TV stations were caught airing an identical editorial about the dangers of biased and false news. Here's what that looked like.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities,
Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But
we are concerned about trouble government and irresponsible one-sided news stories playing in our country.
Who needs state TV, right? It is different from Fox. So different. It's a different story. It's a newscast that gets you when you're open, right? When you're watching your local newscast, when you're taking in information about the weather and the local parades, the local holidays, local figures. But our question today, is it a right-wing disinformation operation disguised as one of the most trusted sources of information and news as we head into the 2024 presidential campaign? It's where we start. President of Media Matters for America, Angela Karsine, is here. Plus, MSNBC contributor and columnist Charlie Sykes is here. With us at the table, the host of the On Brand podcast, Donnie Deutsch, is here. And New York Times editorial board member, MSNBC political analyst Mara Gay is here. So, Donnie, we're just trying to, eyes wide open, right? As we head into this, I've tried to peek over at Fox News. I turned it on when Trump was convicted. I turned it on when Hunter Biden was convicted. And I use it to sort of understand the right wing, the depths of right wing detachment from reality. This is different. This is softer and probably more effective. And there's nothing illegal about it. But it's just an important thing, I think, to have on the radar. I hope it's something that the Biden campaign has on the radar as we head into really sort of the meat of the general election conversation.
Here's what we've got to come to terms with. Life and the media are not fair, and they're getting less and less fair, and things are frightening. You have Wall Street Journal running a horribly sourced piece saying that Biden is unfit, and then you've got these local news people, as you said, more insidiously reading a script about it. And you know what the answer is? A 90-minute debate for Joe Biden. The answer is he's got to answer the bell. The Democrats have not done themselves, and I'm just going to call it like it is, have not done themselves a favor by not having him out there as much as he should be. And this all gets answered. The media is a problem. It's disgusting. It's reprehensible. But we can wring our hands about it, or we can get behind a candidate. And that candidate is hopefully, and I believe he will, is going to show up and answer the question. The other candidate, who comes off like a blithering idiot, hopefully will answer the bell in a different way and show that he's a blithering idiot. We can talk to a blue in the face. It's not fair. The media is unfair. It's getting worse and worse and worse. This is the devil in a lot of ways. Joe Biden's got to answer the bell 2 weeks from tomorrow.
I mean, what do you make? I asked Rachel this question yesterday. What do you make of the fact that Fox isn't carrying Trump's speeches?
It's state TV. We know why. But by the way, and it's the same reason I sat on the show a couple of weeks ago and said, let's end this trial so we can get him back out there. The other thing that is kind of ridiculous, that where Trump gets a mulligan that Biden doesn't get. I was having lunch with somebody right after the weekend when Trump was going, and I was just talking about the speech to a friend of mine who's kind of a swing voter. Trump went to Biden, probably go back to Trump now. And he goes, yeah, but he's really funny. That's what he said to me. He gets these bizarre style points that people overlook the babbling insanity of what he's saying because there is an entertainment value. And that's a problem. That's real. It's not fair. It's where he gets points for that, where Biden doesn't have that. Biden is stately and he comes with gravitas. But he's not entertaining. And he literally, this very educated man, sat there and said to me, yeah, but he's funny. I said, but he's incoherent. Yeah, he's a little crazy, but he's funny. So it's not fair. The stakes are high. The world is not a fair place. Media is grotesque right now. And Democrats have just got to punch in the face and answer the bell. And Joe Biden has to answer the bell.
Angela, I mispronounced your last name. I apologize. Angela Karsine is here. Jump in on how we can do a better job in this cycle. This is Trump's third run. What are we still getting wrong?
So a couple of things. One, I agree the media is not fair. We should accept that, and we shouldn't hand-wring. I do think, though, as you noted in your monologue, what Sinclair is doing is particularly insidious, and that won't just be resolved by Joe Biden being out there more often, because you have sort of a right-wing propaganda operation that is willing to go even further than Fox News. That they've done that in the past, and they're doing it under the imprimatur of a lot of banners, trusted sources, CBS, NBC, ABC. That's the way these affiliate works. So be realistic about the landscape. That doesn't mean we should wring our hands about it. But to your question, we should be realistic. And that then gets into the bigger thing of how do you deal with a guy like Donald Trump? And I do think, as somebody that has watched, just wild to say, 612 Donald Trump speeches since the 2016 election, they're not the same as they were in 2016.
Yeah.
They're not the same as they were in 2020. And my honest hunch is that most of the media, most of the reporters and people talking about him, covering him, have not watched a full speech in years. And the reason it's important and significant is because they'll see just how much he's declined. There may have been entertainment value in Trump in the past. There's not much entertainment value in his speeches right now. There's not new, fresh material. He doesn't have as much inputs as he has. It's revanchism, it's frustration, it's anger, it's confusion, but it doesn't have the same engagement. And that gets to the point that you raised earlier. It's part of the reason why Fox News isn't covering it, because it's not as good for their business as it once was. It's not the ratings draw that it once was, because they're not as entertaining. So I think, to put a bow, if we're going to cover this honestly, we need the people covering it to actually force themselves to sit through a full speech just to get a sense of how much it changed. Because the downstream effects of that is you would not see as much hand-wringing in mainstream media and mainstream reporting about the discrepancies between Joe Biden and Donald Trump's, mental acuity once somebody actually saw what the current state of Donald Trump really is. Not the few snippets of him yelling as he's walking into a room or a courtroom, but actually how he speaks for a full hour. And I think what Donnie said earlier is exactly on point. That debate could be a real pivot point, because it's going to actually force a lot of people that actually have not tuned in for a long time, even though they should be, to just get a sense of just how bad it's actually gotten. That to me feels like the first step.